Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Hi, it's my pleasure to introduce Amy Jo Kim. Amy and I have known each other for a long time, back from Virtual Worlds days. And Amy is the CEO of a company called Shufflebrain, which does a lot of games. And she's really known for the work that she's done thinking about, what elements make a good game, how to design games, and really how to encourage people to have a great experience in your game. And she's worked on a bunch of stuff that you guys are familiar with, like Rock Band and Ultima Online and There, and probably a bunch of others that I don't know about. But anyway, thanks so much for coming, and looking forward to a great talk.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming today.
Oh, you're mic'd.
Yeah, I'm mic'd there. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of some of the interesting developments that are happening in the social gaming world, and talk to you in particular about the relationship between game mechanics and virtual economies that are being driven by virtual goods. Some of you may have seen me talk before about game mechanics. I have a couple of talks that are on YouTube that are go into much more detail about game mechanics than I'm going to do today. And if you're interested in this topic, I'd encourage you to go and just search for me on YouTube. And I also uploaded, and I will upload this one as well, all my talks to SlideShare. So if you're interested in going deeper, feel free. And one of the things that I want to get across today is the reality of virtual goods, in that it's a business model that's driving a lot of the newest and most popular games that are emerging in the social space. And we're also seeing, in the games industry, we're seeing, as you from Xbox Live probably know, we're seeing a lot of games shift from a packaged good model or subscription model, such as WoW, into a virtual goods model where it's free to play and monetized through virtual goods. So I want to really dig into what's going on there in terms of human motivation and game mechanics, and hopefully shed some light on that. So first, a few definitions. So what exactly are virtual goods? They're digital items that have contextual meaning. This is a screenshot from Pet Society. How many of you have played Pet Society? Okay, so one. This is a game on Facebook made by Playfish that has a number of different types of virtual goods within it. There are virtual goods where you can dress up your character as well as customize your character. You can fill your house with with stuff. Your pet's little house. And it might seem, these digital items to many people seem strange. Like, why would people pay? And people pay real money for this stuff. That's the other thing. You can earn coins in this game. Up on the left of the screen, you'll see how many coins my pet has earned. But you can also speed up your gameplay by purchasing coins with cash, with actual cash, using PayPal or any other, using credit cards, even using your mobile phone. And this is one of the phenomena that's really changing the games industry. The thing about the digital items is that the contextual meaning is what makes them socially relevant. So that's something I'm going to be talking about through this whole talk. It's not just the digital items themselves, but it's all the associations that we as humans bring, all the meaning that we bring to seeing pictures on the screen. There's a couple of basic kinds of virtual goods. Decorative goods are goods that don't affect your stats or your gameplay. So for example, in this screen, there's a snow globe and a mirror and various things and an outfit on the character. None of those has in-game meaning. They don't change the way that my character progresses through the game. They're just there for enjoyment showing off, status, that kind of things. Those are what decorative goods are. Functional goods actually make a difference in your stats or gameplay. This is an example from a game called Sorority Life on Facebook. And this is basically a text RPG with a certain setting and skin on it. And these are items that you can buy and dress your character up. And they basically change your stats. They change the likelihood that you'll win a battle, because there's battles at the core of this, as there are with every RPG. And so if you purchase and dress your character up in these items, it changes your progression through the game. And that's what a functional good is. So what are some of the activities that are enabled by virtual goods? One, a very key one, is socializing. Which is enhancing your visual identity, the constructed identity that you have in an environment by dressing your character up or dressing your room up or otherwise purchasing things. These are from Gaia Online, which is an online environment that is highly social. How many of you have ever gone into or played Gaia? Okay, so a few of you. You can really make an amazing variety of looks in Gaia. And these again, this is decorative. These do not have functional elements, but people spend a lot of money dressing their character up so that when they post messages in the message boards or have other interactions in Gaia, they can express what they want to express and impress other people. I should also say before I move on that this style of virtual economy as a business model originated in Korea. And started way back in probably the late 90s and really took off in 2002, 2003. People would dress up their characters and go into chat rooms. And that got the attention of people in the US. And it's really only been somewhat in the last 5 years or so that this has really started to take off. It's a much more mature market over there. Another activity that virtual goods enable is shopping and decorating either your character or your room. These screenshots are from Restaurant City. How many of you have played Restaurant City? Okay, so you're clearly playing a lot. This gentleman is clearly playing a lot of games, which is great. And here are a couple of examples. Those are some of the clothing items that I can decorate my character with, dress my character up. And then I can also decorate my restaurant. Restaurant City is a sort of a mashup between Diner Dash, The Sims, and an RPG. It's got elements of all of those. I can also decorate my restaurant on the outside and the inside, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is something that a lot of game designers overlook is, yes, question?
What is RPG?
Role-playing game. So right now, if you go onto Facebook and look at the top 25 or the top 50 games, quite a few of them are thinly disguised RPGs, role-playing games, which is for those of you who don't know, it's a game where you basically level up your character, usually through fighting. Battling with others is a core part of it. And it's very much a stats-driven game, RPG. It's about the stats that your character has and acquiring items that boost your stats and performing battles, and it's very statistical and mathematical under the sheets. But a lot of social game designers, people that are pioneering these new kind of games, use the motivational and structural elements of RPGs as the backbone of their game design, partly because it works. It's a proven mechanism for motivating people. There's always a short-term goal for you to achieve. So shopping is just the fun of getting new stuff. Browsing through, seeing what's new is something that a lot of game designers overlook, but it's an extremely powerful mechanism and activity for having an enjoyable experience online, particularly for women. How many of you remember Diablo, or whoever played Diablo? So, yeah, thank you. Diablo was so much about shopping. And you make jewels. Yeah, exactly. And so this is, in a sense, that same fun gameplay mechanic. And shopping and killing is what goes on, or shopping and battling is what goes on Sorority Life, which is a girl game, very, very popular and also very profitable on Facebook. So if you have virtual items, you can go shopping and you can do stuff. And in particular, when there's a recession and people aren't shopping as much in the physical world, to be able to go in, for me, for instance, after I've gotten the kids to bed, to go in and maybe get a new jacket for my avatar in a particular game is very pleasurable. So, excuse me?
It's cathartic.
Yes, it is cathartic. And it's a lot cheaper than going and getting a new jacket at Macy's.
Online retail therapy.
Yes, online retail therapy is a huge part, and I'll drill down on that with some very specific examples later in the talk. By the way, thank you for responding and talking and asking questions. Keep doing that. I love it. And another activity enabled by virtual goods is enhanced gameplay. This is the basic time versus money trade-off. So people that don't have money to spend, in most but not all of these games, if you put in enough time, you can earn enough in-game money to get through the game. But it takes a lot of time. And if you have real-world money to spend, you can move much more quickly through the game, level up, etc. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. This has been happening certainly since the late 90s in MMOs, and it wasn't necessarily sanctioned by the developers. But there have been auctions on eBay to buy characters, to buy weapons, to buy houses, to buy epic mounts, to buy whatever in MMOs for a long time. Sometimes the developers sanction it or even set up a in-game auction situation like WoW to let you actually do that. But it's kind of taking on new life in some of the more recent Facebook games. This is an example from a game called Mobsters on Facebook. And you can buy these objects and they will increase your stats in battles, which will help you go level up even further. But today's newest social games are taking this old time versus money trade-off and putting it right in the game and making it very, very easy to just buy your way through the levels, essentially. Yes?
Seems to be sort of two spaces here. There's games that are coming out of a social network like Facebook, and then there's like the WoW stuff that didn't really start with a social network. Is there a shift from one to the other, do you think?
How do you mean a shift?
Well, a lot of this gameplay now is coming out of social networks. It's transitioning to come out of social networks more than it was before. Is that a recent phenomenon, or?
Yeah, it is a recent phenomenon. So yes, so a lot of the games on social networks are evolving very, very rapidly. They look very different than they did 6 months ago, and they're going to look different in another 6 months. They're very different than WoW and than MMOs. They're different in really interesting ways too. I would say they're different threads. They both have virtual goods as a fundamental game mechanism within them, and as one of the reasons that people keep playing. They both have virtual economies that are engaging the players. So the things they have in common, this is some of what's really interesting about the social network games. If you look at the most popular games, the most interesting games on social networks, they're very different, but one of the threads you'll see in them is that the ones that keep people playing, almost all of them have a virtual economy that they use to engage the players. Earn coins, spend coins. Right? That's virtual economy. And same with MMOs. That's one of the most engaging aspects.
I was wondering, because you said that this is one of the things that keeps people playing. Is any of this, in some subtle way, conditioning the users to buy more and more virtual goods because the cost of a virtual good is typically very low? So it seems like, some sort of an operant conditioning mechanism.
Absolutely. You ding dong, you're absolutely right. Basically, these text RPGs are Skinner boxes. That really is what they are. They're not actually that much fun, but they're Skinner boxes. They put they dangle short-term goals in front of you. There's a lot of mechanisms that get you to keep playing and keep buying. And whether that's morally right or wrong, we're not going to get into right now. But if you strip away the details and just get at the structural mechanics, which is something that I've been doing and that other folks that I work with have been doing, that you can really see that it's really very much operant condition. It's a Skinner box. And if you want to get people to behave a certain way, that's a well-established way. And I'm going to talk a little bit about reinforcement schedules and operant conditioning later. But it's a huge part of game design.
Do people spend money to advance a couple levels quickly because it's more fun to play in level 10 than level 5? Or
Yes.
because they want to be on the top of the ladder compared to their peers in the same level?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, and people probably have different motivations too. You know, people aren't all the same. But a lot of people say it's more fun to play at a higher level. You know, like in WoW, how much more fun is it to have an epic mount than not? You know, it just is. So, but also in these games, it's more, people want to play at a higher level. Part of it is just the what's behind that door number 2 thing. You know, it's like they want to see what's at the higher level. And a lot of these games use very manipulative but very successful mechanisms. For instance, it says, look, you can unlock more equipment after level 4. You know, you'll see that sort of stuff scattered everywhere. You know, the dangling the carrot. Yeah. Oh, then you.
So does the gameplay change now? Because it used to be like level 1 is training, right? And then you get harder and harder. So if level 10 is just more fun to play at, is it harder or is it just... Is there any achievement to getting to level 10, and can you play at level 10 having never played at level 10?
Well, you have to go through the levels. You can't just go jump.
Oh.
But what you can do is buy stuff that levels you up faster. And you can spend real money to not have to spend so much time in the game. And then you just buy stuff. And it's, you know, with these RPGs, it's like it's a stats thing. You know, you can buy stuff that makes your stats, pumps your stats. And then when you go do battles, you do better, and then that levels you up faster. But they also, depending on the game, they also require you to invite friends in order to level up. And that's one of the other manipulative tactics that you could argue for or against. But the point is, in regards to virtual goods and virtual economies, is that that is the thread that is keeping people playing, is that opportunity to buy more stuff, and if you buy more stuff, you do better in the game. You had a comment, and then this gentleman.
Is that we're talking about this in the MMO pit yesterday. Basically, in the hardcore gaming world, there is reputation is really important, and if you spend money to get expensive stuff, it doesn't go over very well. In the casual gaming world, thank God, nobody cares how much money you spend. Nobody's like going, oh, you spent a bunch of money, that means that you didn't do a great job or you're just not a good player. There's no like social stigma attached to that.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. That it's true. It's really different. Yeah.
You just might think you're silly for spending that much money, but there's no social stigma attached to it.
Yeah, and absolutely there is in the hardcore gaming world, and in most MMOs. This gentleman.
So if I'm getting you right, then if I would just design an RPG game that would advance the player more quickly, so that he doesn't have to, or that just automatically advances you quicker through the levels, or automatically gives you more items without you paying cash, then that game would not attract or would not keep its players as much as those games where people actually have to spend money.
I don't know that it wouldn't keep its players. It wouldn't monetize.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely. But my question is, because normally we think about that if people don't want to spend money. If I offer you a jacket for free, a jacket for $100, you normally take the jacket for free. And if I offer you 2 worlds where in one world everything is free, in the other world everything costs money, I think you would choose the free world.
Maybe,
So my question
maybe.
is that if
Not
in games,
necessarily.
it might be inverse, that people actually like this little thing where they keep spending little amounts of money that if everything were free, I could imagine they would enjoy this.
Well, one of the things about spending money, and this is very true if you look at the dynamics of virtual gifting, which I'll go into a little later, is that people like to be able to have a range of ways to express themselves or to express their feelings about another person. And if you have for instance, if you had a virtual gifting system where everything is free, it doesn't have as much meaning as if it's 1 cent and 10 cents and a dollar and $10. Then there's, if somebody sends you the $10 gift, it's very different. It holds a different meaning for you. So that's part of the dynamic that's going on. Then you, and I think someone else back there.
I think what you're missing is, imagine a world where everything's free and available in unlimited quantities. Things would quickly lose their value. So I think, there's like a phrase, you get out of it what you put in. It's like, I think goods take on a certain amount of value and meaning when you have some amount of expenditure involved, either money or time that's involved in acquiring them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's absolutely true. This gentleman, then that gentleman.
At least to me it feels a bit that, like paying to get like a better car, so that you can do better. It involves some amount of like cheating in the game that, it gives like a lot of pleasure to some people because like, okay, if I give some extra money, I can cheat and get like a better car and then beat all the other people. And I know several people get like, pleasure out of cheating in games and getting hacks to get unlimited weapons and unlimited that. It feels to me a little bit like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you balance this? What metrics do you follow as you're working through? From a game design standpoint, obviously this balance is pretty important. It's not offend players or keep it fun. How are there metrics that you use in the design process for you to understand how to balance this things along this continuum?
Absolutely. That's a topic that is big. I only touch on that a little bit in this talk, but I can point you at a really excellent presentation that goes into great detail on the kinds of metrics that I saw just last Tuesday. And after this, I'll get you guys the URL for that. But the short answer is, and I want to make a comment about that after you guys. The short answer is that the game companies that are developing these games have put probably more than 50% of their effort into metrics. And they're looking at the metrics of how many people play which quests, how much the quest costs. Once you develop a virtual economy like this, balancing it is an ongoing thing. So you don't just balance it once. You start it, and then you're constantly measuring and tweaking and looking, and you have to keep changing things. And there's basically, I forget the words for it, but there's inputs and outputs. I think it's pipes and flows. Who remembers? Anyway, in economy, there's a certain language for there's money flowing into the system, and there's money coming out of the system. And when people buy stuff, money is essentially coming out. If you have a house and you can blow up someone's house and mobsters and they have to rebuild their house, money's coming out. And so there's all these different sinks and flows when you have this kind of virtual economy. And you need to basically have your finger on all of them and then look at what the players are doing. And basically you want to be, the basic thing, the rule of thumb is you want to start tight and then loosen up slowly. So you want to start with your economy so it's kind of hard to make money. In particular, if you're trying to get people to spend money on coin. But you want, it's better to start tight, make it hard to make money, and then loosen up a little bit as you go to make it easier and easier. Many people start off with too loose an economy, and then it's very hard to go backwards from there and tighten things down. But the short answer is there's no really easy, simple way to say, oh, this is how you balance it. What you do is you put a huge amount of effort into measuring and tweaking in an ongoing way. And if things are out of balance, a lot of times a company will introduce a new feature because they need a sink to pull money out of the economy. Those sorts of things. You see that all the time.
Somewhat unrelated note, do you see in real life, do you see any abuse of these economies? Do you see any abuse of these economies? Do you see stuff like shoplifting in real life?
Oh, fraud is a huge issue. Absolutely. The social game companies like Zynga and Playdom and Playfish have staff devoted to handling fraud. And the more successful you are, the more fraud there is. The biggest problems come if you can convert your in-game money into real-world money. And so most of these companies don't do that. I think Project Entropia is a company that did that and got into a lot of trouble around that. But there's still a lot of fraud. And some companies just decide not to go into this at all because they don't want to handle the fraud. But you have to be prepared to have to manage that and to deal with that and have a policy around that.
Is any of the fraud economically motivated, or is it mostly fans who really want to get on?
I actually don't know. If any, you shook your head. Yeah, go ahead.
There's $1 billion industry in China for gold farming in World of Warcraft. It's $1 billion. I had a couple
That's not exactly fraud. That's in an interesting gray area.
Yeah, no, that's actually what I want to mention. So there are two aspects of WoW which are interesting in terms of things limited. One of them was it used to be, somebody said, well, you can't jump ahead by paying real money. Well, actually, you could. You could level up to level 60, get epic armor, stick it on eBay, and quite literally these were going for $10,000, real money a pop for people who had enough money and didn't want to level up to that level. And WoW went back to eBay and said, can you now make it illegal to sell these things on eBay, which they agreed to do. So you can no longer buy characters. And if they catch you buying a character, they ban you and ban your credit card. So it still happens, but in general, and then there was the question of reputation. People don't know you bought your character most of the time. You suddenly show up in a new realm because you can do realm transfers. Nobody knows it, nobody cares. You suddenly are this brand new character. But in the most recent expansion, and they do this every expansion, you can't use epic flying mounts until later in the game, which I discovered is actually an economic reason. If I can fly anywhere and do collecting of goods to get money, then I basically destroy the economy immediately by having a low-level character simply running around and gathering stuff to make gold. So to protect the economy, they actually prevent fast gathering by not letting you get your mountain grown up, which I thought was an interesting solution to the problem.
So no hedge funds.
There's lots of things that they can't do, hedge funds being one of them.
Yeah, these are, this is great. Those are both big issues. I also wanted to mention something really interesting about the way that most of these social games I'm talking about today are being developed and then iterated once they're launched, and the way that MMOs such as WoW are developed. So if you talk to the designers at WoW, what you find is that it's really much more of a trust your gut development. They hire people who are in their core demographic, and they're used to players. Any of you who've ever built an MMO know that you're going to have a bunch of players telling you they hate everything you're doing. I mean, they just will. So if you were to listen to all of that, you wouldn't design the game you know you want to design. So during game design, and this goes for all of Blizzard's games, they hire people that they know are in their core demographic, and they listen to them, and they have great designers, and they build these experiences, and they certainly listen to their fans, but they don't do what the fans tell them. They don't measure every little thing the fans are doing. They measure a lot about the economy to balance it and manage it once it's out there. But the style of game development is much more about having a vision and then executing on that vision, which is more what I call traditional game development. The social games, it's really fascinating and very new to me as a game developer. The way they develop this game is very audience-driven. Usually they'll release a game very early and then iterate, change. And what they measure is everything, especially with Facebook, all the viral channels. They'll try to do A/B testing up the wazoo of notifications, and the ones that get better responses, they'll go with that. And they'll just do it with every little thing about the game. You know, they'll try different quests. The ones that get the best response, do more of those, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very much metrics-driven and audience-driven. And what ends up happening is you get often, but not always, pretty low-quality games that are very successful at manipulating people. And to me, it's a really interesting dynamic if you look at the results of both of these styles of games. And I think there's probably something in the middle that's going to be more the style that people develop. Absolutely, you want to know what your audience is doing. You want to respond to it. But if you take that to its extreme, you get gambling and porn. Because that, you just it kind of sinks. Well, it's true. I mean, don't you think? It just really, because it's like, if you're going lower and lower on Maslow's pyramid, right? So I don't really have a big, like, this is what you should do or not do, but having talked to developers at both of these companies about how they develop games, I find this bifurcation of style really interesting. And so it's just something to think about, moving forward. So let's move on. So let's get into games and game mechanics a bit. So first definition. So what do I mean by a game? Well, the formal definition taken from Rules of Play, which is a great book, is a system in which players engage in an artificial conflict defined by rules with a quantifiable outcome, like chess or Rock Band or Guitar Hero. Those are all formal games that fall into that. My informal definition, which is much broader, is a structured experience that has rules and goals. That's fun. So for instance, The Sims would not fall into a formal definition of games because it doesn't really have a quantifiable outcome. But it certainly is within my informal definition. And YouTube could be called a game within my informal definition if you wanted to. It certainly has a lot of game mechanics, leaderboards, all kinds of things. So this is the definition I'm using today, which is a big tent for what a game is. And if you look at Facebook games or social network games, many more of them fall into this category. Games are, as we know, very, very powerful. They tap into very primal response patterns that us humans have. The gentleman was talking about operant conditioning. These are schedules of reinforcement taken from operant conditioning. And this chart shows you how effective they are, essentially. The red one being the most effective. That's the variable ratio one. How many of you are familiar with this kind of thing, this operant conditioning schedules? Not very many. So I'll just take you through it really quickly. This kind of data came from studies that were done on rats and pigeons. And it turns out they apply to humans too. This is the Skinner box that I alluded to earlier. The long story short, if you give pellets of food to a rat at very fixed intervals, the rat will just, not show that much interest in the food. It's like, oh yeah, food's coming, great. If you give pellets of food at variable intervals, it's like, might be a minute, might be an hour when the food comes out, and you give different amounts of food. Sometimes it's 1 pellet, sometimes it's no pellet, sometimes it's 100 pellets. You will get the most addictive behavior. The rat will just sit there and push the lever continuously. You can basically program addiction in this way. And this is where knowledge about reinforcement schedules, a lot of game designers use these tactics. And the variable ratio is exactly the reinforcement schedule that a slot machine uses in Vegas or in anywhere else a slot machine is to be found. So I'm not saying, go out and use the slot machine mechanisms to manipulate your players, but these are tools in the toolkit of really any designer who's designing interactive experiences. In that a completely predictable experience is not nearly as interesting and compelling as an experience that has certain amounts of unpredictability to it. As this is revealing human nature to us. We are most compelled when there's a sense of mystery, a sense of, I don't understand this. If you've read Ralph Koster's Theory of Fun, which is a really great, fun, easy read, he talks about this. He talks about mastering a system. A lot of what playing a game is about mastering a system, trying to understand what's going on here, what's the system. And if you can master it immediately, you're going to lose interest. But if it takes a while and you're like, I'm not sure what's going on, maybe it's this, I'll try that, that's a lot of what keeps people engaged and keeps your brain engaged.
It's about our need to understand the pattern, and by withholding the understanding of the pattern, keeps people engaged.
Exactly. That's a really good way to put it. And games, tap into these response patterns. Games also good games are very, very good at engaging us in flow, which is a basic concept where you're balancing challenge and your skill level. Basically, if your skill level is too good for your challenge, you're bored. If you don't really have the skill to take on a challenge, you're frustrated, you're anxious. But if you're right there in the middle, where your skill and the challenge being presented to you are balanced correctly, then you're in flow, time seems to stand still, et cetera, et cetera. This is the goal of most games, and it's part of why games change over time, because you need to change the amount of challenge based on the growing skill of the player. And this basic concept applies to, again, any interactive experience. So game mechanics are the systems and features that make games fun, compelling, and addictive. Not the eye candy, not the great sound design, not the story, but the underlying mechanics. And so I want to talk about 5 game mechanics and then show you how that connects into what's going on with virtual economies in today's social games. The first one is collecting, which is a very, very basic game mechanic. This is a screenshot from Sorority Life that shows you a variety of things you can collect. There's achievements, which are just like Xbox Live achievements. You badges. And by the way, Xbox Live, kudos, really pioneered this in terms of popular consciousness. And everybody and their brother now has badges to mark various achievements within the game. And it's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's, it's just a way to say, here's, it's one of those little carrots dangled in front of you, part of the whole overall Skinner box. But there's more that you can collect in Sorority Life, where it says outfits. This particular person, who is a very experienced player, has over 100 outfits, just it listed under there. And then besides outfits, there's accessories. And then there's all these accessories you can collect. And I talked to the folks who developed this game, and they said that a lot of the people that play and that spend a lot of money don't even necessarily wear the outfits that they buy. They're just collecting them because they want to have them. They like them. And, it's a little mystifying to me because that's certainly not what motivates me. But this is really working for a lot of people. And part of it, it's just, again, it comes down to that collecting thing. You want to have it. And some of it is showing off. Some of it is showing other people how much stuff you have. And some of it is just, again, going back to the fun of shopping. It's just that little buzz that you get, that little dopamine burst in your brain when you get a new outfit. Yes?
For something like this, when you said everybody and their brother plays this, I was thinking, do you think demographics relative to sex play a role in terms of this? I'm just not guessing you're going to see a lot of guys.
Well, this is explicitly a girl game.
But do you see that there's a demographics? Is the use of the economy or the issue surrounding the economy driven differently by whether men or women are playing the game?
So I can't answer that with data because I don't actually I have some data on this game. But I think there are probably plenty of men who collect weapons and mobsters, as well as women that collect outfits here. Part of the game design issue is picking a setting and picking a structure for your game that has a lot of stuff to collect. But for instance, there's a game called Pack Rat that's very, very different on Facebook that you collect cards. And one of the powers of collecting is the notion of completing a set. And you're just really arbitrarily saying this is a set. Anyone who ever collected baseball cards or Pokemon cards or any of those things knows about this. And so part of what Pack Rat does is it has lots of different sets that you can complete. And that works on that. Their demographics are split 50-50 or pretty close. So I think it does cross across gender. I think with girls and shopping, there's definitely a social familiarity and comfort that you don't have as much with men, or certainly not as much social acceptance. But I think that people like to collect stuff, and I think it's not just girls. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, to log on to Facebook and check out Sorority Life, and they have leaderboards, and if you go to they call it the in crowd. If you go to the leaderboard, just click on some of the top people and look at the stuff. Just look at their stuff. It blow your mind.
Does there come to a point where you face a browse fatigue, where they won't search for more items? I mean, is there a maximum? You can't just keep increasing n and then expect revenue to tie to the same attach.
I think you can I don't know if, so the short answer is I don't know. I mean, from the game developers, I don't know if n is, if there's some, you can't collect more than X outfits. I'm pretty darn sure that the game developers have made it so that's not the case, because they're very, very focused on this kind of mechanic and on enabling it. So you can just have if you page through it, there's no reason to limit it. I mean, other than the slow loading times, right? If you have a lot of items. But people do get burned out on these games and just stop playing. But again, one of the powers of this kind of structure, it goes way back to building out your mud character. The more that you develop your character and your stuff, and the harder it is to leave because you spent all that time and you've invested all that time, and you've risen up through the ranks, as it were, and it makes it harder and harder to leave. So, anyway.
In Pet Society, too, they do the limited edition stuff that you can't get, and you only have a certain amount of time to get it. So, for the super uber collectors, it's
just like QVC.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of the balancing of these games is figuring out what items to create, because you always, and I'm going to give you guys a list of kind of best practices that people are doing, just for those of you who are interested in implementing this stuff. But you always are having to introduce new stuff. And one of the questions is, how do you price it? How many are there? Is it limited edition? Is there a limited time, et cetera? And these are tricks of marketing. I mean, these are things that QVC does. These are things that direct marketers do.
Stuff like Hershey's does.
Yeah. And it's just being reinvented in the context of virtual goods.
So I have a question about the notion of collecting. So, I mean, to my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so if you look at all those items there, there's some, there's just points and some set of, there's design parameters, right? Like color and shape. I mean, there's, I guess the way I'm thinking of it is like, how far apart do you have to, if you think of all the different parameters you can vary to design something. I mean, how far apart do these two different items have to be in the design space for them to
have meaning?
Yeah, it's like, because I can imagine if you just keep pumping out very similar looking items that just slightly different, I don't know about dresses, but like let's say dress 08, dress 09, like some software is pumped out, and people would just be like, well, why am I upgrading?
Right. Well, I'm sure there are some things that have pretty small differences. What this particular game, what they do is that they invoke the names of designers. So you don't just buy pumps, you buy Jimmy Choo pumps, right? And so...
Because in reality, you can't afford a Jimmy Choo.
That's right. But in sorority life, go to town, baby.
You can have a Vivian Westwood handbag, even though you can't afford one.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't have like a statistical answer of how far they have to be. I would say that the design space is pretty darn big with clothing, but I mean there's not that many pixels, right? They're not that big, so there's a lot of creativity involved in that, and they definitely take one design and then skin it with lots of colors. So that's step one, is lots of different ones, but they can't be too close together. So. And then I think they also have like slight differences, but they name them. The thing is, there's metadata associated with it. So you can also differentiate with the metadata that has social meaning to the people buying it. That's another trick. Did you have a question or comment back there?
I was just going to comment about the similar
Sure.
thing. In World of Warcraft, there are certain things that are tough to get, can't be bought, and give a social status that's outside of the realm of anything else. So, for example, there's a crown. It is seasonal. You can only get it at the summer festival. It can only be gotten if you go to all of the 4 enemy cities and somehow manage to get your way through and survive it. So just having it indicates what you've done and where you've been. But instantly recognize it as, I get where you've been. It implies a certain social status. You're better than other people who couldn't get it.
Absolutely. And you'll see things like that in most of these games. In Pet Society, believe it or not, there's something called Golden Poo. And it's because sometimes your pet will poop, and sometimes I think it's like from talking to the developers, there's some magical statistical thing where it doesn't happen very often. There's apparently also, even rare is rainbow poo. So that's the equivalent of that in WoW, which pretty much sums up the tenor and tone of social gaming right there.
It's analogous to back in the 90s when you'd find what became known as an Easter egg in software. And there was great kudos being able to show somebody an Easter egg, look, I've got 12 fingers on the keyboard doing this random combination and this thing turns up out of Microsoft Word or something like that. analogous to that sort of thing.
Exactly. Well, anytime you have a virtual economy, you need to have rare items, or the whole thing doesn't really work smoothly. So the notion of rare items that have social meaning is really central to building any kind of healthy or interesting virtual economy. That's kind of the punchline of all of this. Okay, so collecting, yeah. So collecting, the point here is that collecting is a basic game mechanic and a very basic human activity that's enabled by virtual goods. And that's a very powerful means of getting people to keep playing a game or keep staying engaged in software. For instance, Hunch, which is a newly launched, what do you call it exactly? What would you call it? I guess it's a decision support system, has badges. And you collect your badges, just like everything else. So it's pervasive, powerful, goes far beyond games. There's just, show me your stuff. There's, and, friends, collecting friends, obviously. But, is something that people do on social networks, on Twitter, etc. Except they're not called friends there. And there's your inventory from WoW. So another one is earning points. Earning points is probably the most basic game mechanic. If you can't earn points, it's not really a game. And this is a screen from Farmtown, which is actually one of the most popular, if not the most popular game right now on Facebook. It's this little simulation game where you pretend you're running a farm. And when you see your friends, what you see is their points, their level, the amount of points or XP that they've earned, and also the amount of coins that they have. And this is a really key thing about sorting out who's doing what. So the whole earn points and level up game mechanic is pervasive and is very much part of what's driving virtual goods. A lot of these games make it so that you have to buy certain goods before you can level up. And you can either put in the time to buy them, or you can spend some money and buy them and then level up faster, as I mentioned earlier. So here, this is a Pet Society screen where it says 1 to watch up there. That's the amount of points that I've earned so far. This is my character. And it shows me what level I'm at as well. I'm at level 7. And there's always another level to achieve, just like in WoW, just like in any RPG. But this is something, the point I want to make is that this goes way beyond games. The idea of levels are just arbitrary marks on a continuum, right? They're not anything magic about levels. When you sit down and design a game, where do you put the levels? You just decide. You decide based on, different things. But, and points are just a way of measuring your progress. This is something that you could use in any interactive software, the notion of being able to measure progress. And levels really give you a shorthand. Instead of saying I have 7,396 points, you say I'm level 36, and then you have shorthand. What's interesting about a lot of the games that include a virtual economy is that there's really at least 2 and often more point systems. I have my regular point system, which is where it says 1 to watch. That's my actual progress through the game. But I also have how much coin I have, how much money I've earned. And that's a parallel point system. And that's the point system that actually lets me get stuff within the game. Some virtual economies have dual currency systems as well. This is an example of actually this one is a dual currency system. See where there's that little fish up there in the 0? That's a different kind of coins. That's cash. And there's some items in the game that you can only buy with cash. You cannot buy it with the coins that you've earned. And the reason that developers introduced this, and you see this in many games, Gaia has the same thing, a dual currency system. The reason, every time you see this, it's purely about them making money. There's no there's no in-game reason for this. There's no reason that there should be things that you can't buy with your coins. It's that they want there to be certain things that either have magical powers or maybe are just decorative and show status that can only be bought with money because they want their game to make money.
Is that successful? Or is that
it's very successful.
Symptom of bad design?
It's very successful.
I can say that's very successful.
And your pocketbook shows it?
We won't talk about that.
Okay.
That's my game.
Yeah, it's, when I first ran into this, I did some work for Gaia, and that's when I first ran into this, right when they were introducing their dual currency system. And I was like, why are you doing this? It's more complicated, and et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, we need to make money, and this is free to play. So this, again, all of this is presuming a free to play model. That's the other thing, you don't have to do this sort of thing if you've got a subscription model or a packaged good. But if you've got a free to play model, you basically need to stay in business. You need to be able to keep, and when you have this kind of a system, unless you're constantly balancing, tweaking, and pumping out new goods into the system, it doesn't work. So it costs quite a bit of money to actually run these games. So they're trying to figure out how to make the whole thing work, and that's why they introduce this kind of dual currency system.
I think that they've been very smart about adding additional mini games inside Pet Society that allow you to not just, you can play the game while you're earning points and having a good time. So like there's little meta worlds inside Pet Society that also makes it more appealing to just, you're not just buying stuff and decorating a room, you're actually doing more things, right? There's a
Right.
cafe, there's...
Right, yeah. So they've introduced a lot of other activities that keep it interesting. But the activities also give you another reason to buy goods. I'm trying to remember, does Pet Society, I think in the arena, how well your pet does in the race depends on your level and on... No?
You can bet with, you can have it autoplay for you, and you can bet who's going to win out of your family.
And what determines who wins?
Who gets to the finish line first.
But I mean, if it's...
Thing you were talking about earlier.
No, I'm just wondering if it's something about your stats, about the character's stats. It's not tied to that at all.
The more you bet, the harder it is.
I see.
You can also like race. You can actually physically use your character to race against other people. So the better you are at playing the game, the better your points are. Overall.
Yeah, yeah. In sorority life, the more if you buy fancier clothes, your character is more likely to win battles in that particular. But Pet Society is different. Yeah. Excuse me?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I mean, the deal is, like, in Pet Society, people collect for status, and they have limited edition rare items that you can only get seasonally, and some of them probably will never come back. And because of that, there's a whole economy built on rare items. And then, like, if you join later, there's no way for you to ever get those items. So you hoard those. And then they also have a recycling mode where you can recycle items and get special items by recycling. So that's encouraging you to buy more stuff, because the only way to get those special items is to recycle things, and the only way to do that is to buy things. And you don't actually have to buy stuff. The more friends you add, and the more people you get involved, the more you visit them, the more coins you get. So you can actually get pretty far in the game without ever spending any money if you wanted. But then you have to dedicate that type of time. And by the time, like, I have 50 friends that play, and that'll take me a good hour to get through all those, right? Those friends and visiting them.
Right.
I know. If you want to be my friend on Facebook,
yeah.
I'm here for you.
Right, and they also have a cash shop where you can only buy stuff with Playfish Cash.
Yeah, and the only way you can put that stuff around is you have to gift it to people. So if you buy something and you want to send it to somebody else, you can't send it out of your inventory. Actually, when you buy it, you have to gift it, and then you are the only one that can own that.
So back to the main thing. So I'm talking about game mechanics and points, levels, leaderboards, all those sorts of things. So I want to make a differentiation between points that are granted by the game, and all the 964 points there, level 7, that's game points. I've interacted with the game and I've earned those points. There's another kind of points, which reputation, rating systems, all of those are what I call social points. And those are points that are given by other players. In Restaurant City, which is a game by the same people that made Pet Society, your restaurant can get rated. See those stars right there, those 5 stars? So that's a rating that was accumulation of ratings by other players. And you'll see these rating systems, not just in games, but very broadly on the internet, on all kinds of different sites, on YouTube, etc. This is called Gourmet Street in Restaurant City. And this is a collection of the highest rated restaurants that have been rated by other players. They put them all together in one place and showcase them. And so it's a way to, it's kind of like a leaderboard, but more interactive. And if you're trying to build a social experience, if you're trying to develop a system and you want it to have social elements to it, thinking about social point systems is a really great thing. It gets people more engaged. It can also be very easily gamed. A lot of social point systems can be gamed, and that you have to deal with that and try and design it so that it's not so gamed. An interesting example of social points is, how many of you have used Flickr? Okay, so Flickr has a metric called interestingness. That's an amalgamation of all of the interactions around a particular photo. How many people have commented, how many people have viewed it, how many people have referenced it, put it into a group. All of that activity cumulatively is measured by interestingness. And that's a social point system because it's other people interacting with your photo. But it's very hard to game because of the way that it's structured. And I think that's a particularly brilliant system. And it works really well. If you click on Show Me the Most Interesting Photos, you see great photos. You don't see crap showing up there. And it's because that system was designed to really be smart and to beat against that. Yes?
So do you think obfuscation of that algorithm or the complexity of it was like the bigger factor there? Because I mean, clearly...
That's a great question, yeah.
You have the same problem.
I think it's both. I think that it's... I think that if they said exactly how they did it, that would let people game it. I mean, that's always a double-edged sword. Transparency in your algorithms is you can decide, it's context dependent. Should you be transparent about how you're measuring things? Sometimes it's a really good idea, but a lot of times it just makes people game the system. The other problem with, this is just an aside, as a designer, making your algorithm transparent makes it much harder to tweak. So a lot of times it's better to just tell people at a high level what you're doing, and then you can mess with it and tweak it and tune it and do all those things under the sheets.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Are you going to cover, you mentioned early on that Asia was the originator of a lot of this.
The what? I'm sorry?
Asia
Yes.
was an originator. Everything I've seen so far is an American take on that. Are you going to cover any of the...
Not today. One of the problems with covering the Asian stuff is that I don't read Korean or Chinese. So for me to actually go in and grab screenshots, I can talk about, and if you guys want to ask me questions, I can talk about large-scale things that are going on in terms of trends. But I don't have very particular examples. I just don't play those games. But if you have any knowledge about that, or anyone wants to share that.
No, I'd love to, at the end, if you could tell us the big macro differences between the markets, that would help me a lot.
You mean between, oh, okay.
The US and Asia?
Sure.
Because they have 10 years more experience at this than us.
Well,
and they are different culturally.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now there's a few really basic things. Part of why free-to-play, microtransaction-based, virtual item-based games are so popular in Asia is because of piracy and fraud. It's probably the #1 reason. And it's different there than it is here. There's huge amounts of piracy. No casual games make money there. And very few, a lot of, you at Microsoft probably know about these issues, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Same thing with games. So it's not that they, dreamed up this brilliant model and they're so smart. It's that they were driven to it because of all the piracy. So, and I know that from multiple sources. And then Asia is not in and of itself the same. So the dynamics of the Chinese market are different than the dynamics of Korean market and also Japanese. They're all very different. Right now in China, a lot of people play in public things. They're called PC bongs in Korea. They probably have a name for them in China. So people are playing on machines that aren't their own, and that really creates a very different dynamic. Another thing in particular about Korea is that as a culture, Korea is much less celebratory of individualism and, going against the pack and, expressing yourself in the culture itself There's a lot of emphasis on fitting in, on doing the right thing. It's a much less free-for-all, somebody from the gutter can rise up and be an entrepreneur, and that just doesn't really happen nearly as much, if at all, in Korea. It's getting into a certain school is going to determine the rest of the course of your life. And that leads to some really interesting dynamics in education. If you guys are interested, I can tell you about this really fascinating, I'll tell you later, but there's a company called Mega Study that's just this hugely successful company in Korea that's really about test prep. But part of why, before I showed you avatar customization, part of why that took off in Korea was that there's much less opportunity for people to express their individuality and even their craziness in physical world, in real life. It's not accepted, it's looked down on, and it's just not there. The opportunity isn't there. It's also a much more homogeneous society than America. Just looking around the room, there's different colors of skin and different, America is much more of a melting pot. And we celebrate that, although, obviously there's problems with that. It's not always the case. Whereas in Korea, that's just not the case. It's much more homogeneous. So the dynamics of playing a character that's different, that looks different, that has, that's dressed different, plays a really different role as an outlet for people in Asia than here, and in particular in Korea. So that's a short version of what's going on. The other thing that's going on in those countries, particularly in Korea, that's the one I know the most about, is that the mobile phone is really pervasive. And so people being able to put payments on their mobile phone bill, started there and is just incredibly common. And it's catching on here now, but it's different. It's much more advanced there. And it's just because, partly because there isn't as much competition and fragmentation as there is here in the mobile phone industry. There's just a few providers. Sometimes it's controlled by the government. And so it's much more simple in a way, the mobile phone infrastructure, and in particular the billing infrastructure.
One other thing they've got in Asia that I've seen in Japan is the proximity detection for mobile phones allows you to have effectively quick nets that get set up, say, on a commuter train, where you can actually play with people that are local to you and not even know who they are, but you know that they're local to you. And that also adds an interesting spin relative to dating.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Where, in Korea?
No, in Japan.
Oh, in Japan.
Because they allow for proximity detection through various methods. So I can be sitting on a train and see someone across the way, not that I would have done this, but you could, for example, send a note to them and say, I'm interested in you, you look really cute, blah, 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 and see what the response was. But you couldn't do the same in the US because you don't know, there's no way of getting to them.
Well, you wouldn't actually know what the person is, right? The reason Facebook is not successful in Japan is there's a pride about anonymity.
Yeah.
So I assume there's someone else on this train who's playing this game.
Yeah, you have
it's
to,
not the
you
person.
both have to buy it.
That's really interesting.
I'd like to add about why this mobile phone payments are so popular. I don't know about Korea in particular, but I know that in ex-Soviet Union countries, the payments of cell phone are so popular because there is no other way, in fact. Like credit cards are, almost nobody has them, and online payments are very rare and people don't trust them. It's actually one way is pay cash and buy some virtual coins or money or whatever, and another way is pay with SMS, which is simpler, and it's actually the only way practically that can be used.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it looks like it's quickly becoming the payment method of choice worldwide. The other thing about mobile phones is that if microtransactions showing up on your mobile phone bill often are not so noticeable, especially to your parents if you're a kid, because there's already a bunch of little microtransactions there.
One quick question.
Sure.
I was told by a friend from Poland that back in the good old days in Poland, people had more money to spend than there were goods to buy. It was a controlled economy problem where you had more money to buy than there were goods, and so people would line up in lines not knowing what they were lining up for, figuring at the end of the line was either a refrigerator or TV or whatever. Are there still great opportunities in that sort of environment to sell virtual goods
I don't
in the world
know.
today?
That's a really interesting question.
Loop does, like they sell these things called bags of crap. Like no, seriously, they have these occasionally, like once a year on Christmas, they have this thing called crap. So you pay $1 for each bag. Now they could range everything, apparently rumored, from like a TV, like an HD TV, to just like a bag of fresh air. So you don't actually know what you're getting, but people line up and buy it.
Right, but it seems to me that a virtual economy would be especially compelling if we could still...
If there's limited goods.
Right now, where you couldn't spend real money on goods, but I guess that might be in the background.
Yeah, I guess that's not around right now, given the world.
Exactly. Same idea.
Yeah. I wouldn't worry about that.
Well, I mean, the bag of crap, the mystery box, is, again, going back to those reinforcement schedules, not knowing what you're going to get. Very compelling. So, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I don't know. I do know that the companies running these games have had a much harder time overseas than in the U.S., that they're far more monetizable and popular here in the U.S. It may just be that the companies are based in the U.S. I think the company that's most probably poised and able to do that is Playfish, because they have offices all over the world. But if I find out something, I'll try and follow up.
I spent a year in China. I was shocked at the crappiness of the games being developed, but yet were hugely popular. I think if enterprising US-based people that knew how to write software would just go out there and actually write the same things. You essentially in China have the same game concepts that you have worldwide, ported by Chinese-owned companies, and software is fairly bad.
What I've heard from everybody is that it's the distribution stranglehold that keeps it from really happening, and that a lot of American companies have tried to do business in China and had problems getting distribution because of the way that things work.
Bear in mind, World of Warcraft's doing very well in China, so someone's...
QQ.
Yeah. Well, that's a Chinese company.
But you could download games from all
now
over the world.
versus the 9.
Still, it's Redwood.
So another game mechanic that I wanted to address is feedback. And this is, of course, not just for games. Lots of software uses feedback. What's different about games is that they use feedback particularly well, both real-time feedback to let you know what you're doing and longer-term feedback to let you know how close you are to mastering the environment. And using feedback basically accelerates your mastery and makes anything more fun, whether it's Google Maps or maybe I shouldn't say that here, but these screens are for, these are my nephews playing Guitar Hero. Yes, I have Korean nephews. So the reason I know about Korea is that my husband's Korean, and we've been there before. So in terms of engaging social games with feedback, a lot of the examples I've given you before are just constant ways of letting you know where you are in the game, how much further you have to go, and using virtual goods is a convenient way to express that. Being able to collect stuff and show off all the things you collected is another form of feedback. Exchanges are another game mechanic, and an exchange is a structured social interaction, giving a gift, shaking hands, back and forth form of social engagement. There's two kinds of exchanges. I'm going to move along a little more quickly. We only have 20 minutes. Implicit and explicit. This is something that is a little subtle, but is actually really interesting and important when you're designing this kind of software. An explicit exchange is where the back and forth is explicitly built into the system. So on Facebook and MySpace, adding a friend is, please be my friend. If you say yes, you're both friends. That's an explicit exchange. Playing chess is a series of explicit exchanges. An implicit exchange is when there's a one-way gesture and you can respond or not. It's not built into the system that you have to respond. So, for instance, a wall post. I left a wall post on my friend's wall the other day. And Facebook happens to make it really easy using the wall-to-wall concept to respond back and forth. But my friend doesn't need to respond. But there's a certain social pressure to respond. Same with giving a gift. It turns out that in the virtual gifting systems, there's a great demand for the thank you gift. That's simply, thank you for giving me a gift. You gave me a gift, okay, I'm going to thank you. A lot of companies have added that because the players requested it. It's an implicit exchange. eBay's reputation system, how many of you have ever used eBay? Okay. eBay's reputation system, let me ask you, is the reputation system implicit exchange or explicit exchange?
People ask you to like respond in kind.
That's right, exactly right. But you don't have to. The system doesn't require you to, but the fact that everybody asks you to, and in fact they'll leave bad messages for you if you don't, is the power of an implicit exchange. Is probably more powerful than if they had made it explicit. Because that was a design decision. They could have made it explicit, could have required two-way, but they didn't. They let it just be implicit. So that's just something to ponder as you're designing software, is think about the structuring the exchanges in a system and leaving room for there to be emergent behavior like there is in eBay's reputation system. And the fifth one is customization. This is my character in Pet Society with a couple of little outfits that I can dress up. And customization is one of the foundations on which any virtual goods business model is built, which is to be able to trick out your mount or your character or your room or your restaurant or your whatever. Is to be able to do that is, if you look at people's behavior in playing these games, a huge part of why people spend money on virtual goods and engage with virtual goods is customization. So for character customization, that's an example from WoW of the different kinds of characters you create. I would argue that anybody's MySpace page is a form of character customization. And for better and for worse, MySpace really made it very loose how you could make your page look. It can be as ugly as you want, basically. But to allow your players to customize is something that's very powerful. And again, it's one more reason to not leave the game. One more reason to stick around is the amount of customization that you've put into it. Another kind of customization that's not as relevant for the games I'm talking about, but is definitely relevant for software in general, is interface customization. You know, having your own dashboard, having your My eBay view. This is a mobile phone app that lets you select a bunch of little widgets just for you, just the ones that you want. So that was a brief overview of a few pretty basic and pretty fundamental game mechanics. Let's pull it all together now and talk about how game mechanics are driving virtual economies. So collecting. I basically already covered that, which is collect stuff and show off and, you know, get the pleasure of doing that. So boosting your stats and leveling up through buying stuff, this loop, buy stuff, boost your stats, level up, is driving virtually every successful text RPG on Facebook. And it's also driving other games as well. Feedback on your progress and mastery. We talked about this earlier. Some of you brought up the point of being able to show simply through the objects that you have how good a player you are, what level you are. Here's somebody on their mount in WoW. And there you go. You know that person's not a noob, unless they bought their way into it. That's very explicit feedback. And it plays out similarly in Pet Society with rare items, etc. It's part of what drives the whole economy around virtual goods, is that it gives you that kind of feedback, that's social feedback, that shows not just you but other people where you are in the game. This is another example from, I guess this is also from Sorority Life. You can, I brought a Prius because I have one in real life, and there you go. But you know, this enables me to do better in the game, and it enables everybody else to see how I'm doing. Pardon?
How much have you spent in Sorority Life?
Next slide.
Is this the same company as the other one?
Which other one?
The other one.
The gangsters.
Yeah. So
it's this. Not only is it the same company, it's the same engine. Yeah,
okay.
It's exactly the same. It's simply a different skin on the same engine. Why do you ask? Just because it was looking startlingly familiar?
Yeah, just the mechanics.
The mechanics are identical, absolutely identical, and they're actually cranking out more. Yeah, for better and for worse. So, I mean, I have to say, I have very mixed feelings about these games because I find them very manipulative and not that much fun. But I wanted to show you guys, partly because I figured it would be something a little different, and because this is what is successful right now. It's really very popular, and a lot of people are playing. A lot of people are engaged and manipulated by these mechanics. And a lot of what's driving them is the virtual goods loops that we're talking about here. And these dangling carrots, you can unlock more glam after level 3. So they also play out in social exchanges. There's a really interesting dynamic going on in a lot of Facebook games right now. This is a good example of it. This is from Farmtown. They innocently show you a screen that says, send your friends a tree for their farm. Oh, okay, great, yeah, and it's free. It's free, send it to them. So then you say, okay, I'll send it to them. And then your friend gets a thing that says, so-and-so has sent you a gift, send one back. And it's actually, it's kind of weird. But it's a big driver of recruitment, in particular in this case. So gifting is probably the most important social exchange if you're looking at social gaming, the ability to give gifts. This is from Catster, closely related to Dogster. How many of you know about Dogster or Catster? Okay. And what you can see here in the bottom is that there's a little gift box. This particular cat has gone to heaven. You can see from the wings that they've gone to heaven. And, but, people can actually, they don't give each other gifts. Your cat gives the other cat a gift. That's how it works. And this has been a big revenue driver for them. People actually do this. A lot of people do this. And so people that say, oh, virtual goods, I don't get it. It's like, take a look at Catster.
When you say revenue driver, what do you mean?
What I mean is that people are I don't know. Actually, Ted, the CEO, won't tell me numbers. But he said it's...
What's he driving?
They introduced virtual gifts, and I believe it's around 20% of their revenues at this point. So I do know percentages. So, and in terms of virtual goods, which is virtual goods and real pleasure, which is the point I'm trying to get across, this has been a very popular feature. People are asking for more gifts. They're asking for, it to be expanded. What's going on socially is that gift giving is really well understood social gesture. The fact that it's a picture of a cat and a picture of a ribbon isn't really what's going on. What's going on is that there's this pent up energy that people have to express how they feel in a relationship. And if you, as a designer or a creator of an environment, can unlock that pent up energy, that's going to be a good thing. You're going to be successful. But the important point is that it's not that thing there. It's all the context that's embedded in our brains about what that means. That's what's going on. And these are just the enablers of that context in a virtual environment.
Yeah, in some Asian cultures, gifting is really important. Does gifting go better, over well better in Asia, or is it pretty universal?
It's pretty universal, at least from what I've seen.
One question. So you mentioned all these things about gifts and like mutual exchanges, but I mean, one can imagine there's like a flip side to that. For let's say I don't like someone, right? How come these games don't have some mechanism that says, okay, that allows me to say either I don't know, I guess the virtual equivalent of throwing a tomato on their face or something, and having that would still be an exchange, but somewhat.
There are things like that. I mean, on Facebook, there's all kinds of like throw sheep, throw, this, that, and the other thing. There's a whole bunch of lightweight, silly games that are like that. But people basically don't pay attention to the people they don't like. People pretty much give attention to people that they want to engage with, as far as I can tell. And when they throw something at each other, they're not throwing it at their enemies. They're throwing it at their friends.
I mean, if you don't like somebody, you're not going to add them to your friends list, right?
Or you could battle them.
Right.
Sort of related to that point, there are rating systems, social rating systems, where there's a sort of implicit or explicit sort of negative rating, and there are others where it's only a positive rating, right? And are you seeing a trend in one direction or the other, or are you seeing one being more effective than the other?
I've seen a lot more only positive social rating systems.
That's
actually
my
a
sense, too.
big trend. And again, I mean, I think part of it is that, there's so many trolls online and negative people that hide behind anonymity or hide behind, a persona, that I think people are trying to route around that. But I've had experience with both of those systems, and basically the positive ones, if you take the positive negative, right, if this is like the midpoint, and you just shift the whole thing up, if you don't have much of a positive rating, it's equivalent of a negative rating.
But it's different than having a fixed scale, say a 5-star rating system or something, right? If you've got 2 stars out of 5, you know that's not great, right? But if you don't have as many points as somebody else, cumulative points, I don't think it's viewed quite as negative, right? So.
Yeah, but I don't quite know why, but I've definitely seen a trend toward 0 and up rating systems, the pure positive rating systems. Including in our own experience with our game, we built a Facebook game called Photograb. That's a find the detail brain game. And we started off with actually a rating system that gave you a rating, and then you could kind of go up and down. And as you played, if you didn't do so well, it would go down, and then it would go up. We got this big outcry. People were saying, I'm not motivated to play. I don't like this. So we revamped our rating system and made it all positive and got a lot more good response from people. So some of it is, I think, goes into why people play games. People don't play games to feel bad about themselves. They play games to lose themselves for a few minutes and to, have an enjoyable experience. So I think that's part of why there's a trend toward the all positive rating systems. Did you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say, I think eBay switched their ratings that sellers can give buyers from positive, negative to just positive.
Did they?
Yeah.
Probably for a similar reason, I would guess. Another quick comment there? Yeah.
Yeah, these virtual economies are getting much closer to the real economy than what I'm used to from games 5 years ago. I wonder, have any games reached the point where they've got so similar to the real economy that it turns people off?
That's a great question.
And particularly, my impression was that a lot of the people who play these games, when they're playing it, it's because they've kind of opted out of doing stuff in the real world to go into this. I wonder if it could turn them off in that sense, because it's turning into something that they've rejected already.
That's a good question. I can't think of an example of that. There may be one that I don't know about, and if there is, if it's turning everybody off, it's probably not popular enough to reach. Does anyone have any other thoughts on it?
There's too many alternatives, I think. You have such a breadth of game types to pick from that it's going to be hard to find transitionary stats between someone moving from one title to another because of, like, say, the economy is a little too real. You can take like something that's more economically driven, like Lineage, and try to see who's moving from that to World of Warcraft, which is slightly less but still has an economy and that sort of thing. But I don't think that's on their survey questions. So, and ultimately, it's the individual title developers that hold all the statistics on this stuff, and they're not sharing.
A lot of what makes a game fun is that it's kind of similar to things you're familiar with in the real world, but it's a micro world. It's simpler. It takes out the boring stuff, but it's familiar enough that you like it. And I think that's exactly what you're seeing in these examples. And I'm glad that it's showing you stuff that you're not familiar with. That was my intent today, was give you a bit of a survey of what's going on with today's virtual economies, especially on the social networks. But I think that's a danger, and I think that good game designers are very careful to make it not too much like the real world, but make it a simplified, more fun version of the real world. So I just have a few more slides. We have 5 more minutes. I want to make sure I get them. So yeah, so gifting is something that if you're interested in this stuff, pay close attention to. It's getting bigger and bigger, and it's showing up in non-gaming environments. And I could give you guys a whole talk on that, but we don't have time today. But a couple other things. So one of the things I'm seeing a lot of right now on Facebook, and there's a lot of copying that goes on Facebook. One company presents a new feature, and then everybody else jumps on it, is gifting to recruit new players, but with a twist. So there's this game called Dog World, and you pick and the twist there is that the more you play, the more they'll give to the SPCA, so you're saving abandoned dogs. And again, it does this thing where it says give a free gift to your friends, but then your friends are told to give you a gift in return. And in this case, they don't have to pay for it. In this case, they can just pick one to give. But I think, you may have to pay for it with coins, and you have some, and then you have to get more. In Mafia Wars, which is just like Mobsters and just like Mob Wars and just like all the other ones, same thing. They introduced this fairly recently. Give a free gift to your friends. So in this case, I apologize if I don't have the details right. I don't think you have to pay for it. Really, this is just a recruiting tactic, the idea of giving a gift. Why this is interesting is that gift giving has, again, it's got, in our brains, we've got all this association with gift giving and what it means to someone. Because they could say just, it's not a gift. They could present it as, here's a thing. But they present it as a gift. It's just the wording of it. Here's a gift. And gifting engenders a sense of obligation in people. It just does. It's part of how it works. And so then you feel obligated to give a gift back and to maybe play the game. And it's just a trick. It's like part of the bag of tricks that people are using to manipulate people into joining the game and playing. Once you're in the game, if the game's not fun, you're not going to keep playing. But it's an increasingly popular tactic.
So, yeah, I remember reading a book about like these manipulative tactics. It was like some kind of cult. Like they would just hang out at airports and give people free flowers and then solicit donations.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, and then the thing is, I mean, eventually people just got like they just realized what they're doing, and it really I guess burned out their audience from the gifts, and people just became suspicious when others offer them gifts because they're like well, what do you want in return? Because and I think that's unfortunate because they're basically hijacking this social protocol for their own purposes.
That's really interesting. I think there is a fair amount of burnout that goes on here, and the reason the games stay popular is that there's this constant stream of new people coming in. So most of the people playing the games are new. Most of, just statistically, if you look at the charts that developers put up at conferences, the reason that this works is that it works on newbies, and then they quickly get tired of it, but then there's always more newbies coming. And then customization, I already talked about how customization drives virtual goods. This is one of the key drivers. This is not my house in Pet Society, but someone else's house. And every one of these items was purchased, all this crap. So you see these people, I mean, it's kind of weird because it's so consumerist, but you see people, the people who are high-level players in the game have blinged out their character, and they've got just, their apartments are just filled with all this crap, and apparently they enjoy it. But again, it's a metric of like, how high are you in the game? How much crap do you have in your apartment? And whether it's good or bad, it's what's happening. And, and then that's my character in Sorority Life in one of her new designer dresses.
What time she said this?
So here's a quickie on executing on a virtual goods strategy. You have to start with a meaningful context, or nothing happens. And probably all these games, you prime the pump by giving somebody free goods and or currency just to get people started. And then you need to create some sort of demand for premium content, or there's no differentiator. And you have to pump ongoing fresh content in at a range of price points. And again, I'll make these slides available, so don't worry if you can't grab all this. And you have to make it super easy to purchase currency, or the whole thing falls apart. And that's a little bit of a primer. So a few closing remarks. Virtual goods absolutely evoke real emotions in people. This is a person who staged a picnic in Pet Society, and I found out this wasn't the only person. I mean, there's just, if you go online and search for Pet Society picnic, whole bunch of pictures and hits will come up. People are really engaging in these worlds, and the virtual goods are what make it seem real to them, as you can see here. But that only happens if there's well understood social context around the goods. This was a gift that my friend Jeremy sent me for my birthday. And why does this work? Because I understand a birthday gift. What's weird, I have to say, what's weird is that it says how much the gift was. So, well, maybe that'll change. It seems pretty tacky to me. What?
Take the sticker off.
Exactly. It's like leaving the price tag on. But that's the way gifting works right now on Facebook. So that's interesting. But, pardon?
It's done a lot in Asia. It'll say how valuable the gift was that your boyfriend gave you. So it leaves the price tag on, so then if I give a gift to my girlfriend, she's gonna know how much it was, no matter what. Like I can't turn that off.
It's even weirder in real life in Japan. When you go to a wedding, you note down the gifts and their approximate prices for everyone that gave it to you. So when you go to their kid's wedding, you return an equivalent amount of money to that thing. And they're very studious in writing down, okay, we got the turnip twaddle or whatever, that's like $3,000. They write it all down and they keep track of it until the next
I know
wedding.
people in the US do that.
Yeah. Everyone does that at some level, right?
I didn't do it. But I mean, literally, they almost return dollar for dollar the same amount at the wedding. So.
Amazing. So another key takeaway here is just a virtual economy absolutely drives ongoing use. You know, coins to earn, stuff to spend it on that's relevant in the context of the game is the basis of pretty much all of today's really popular games. And once you've done that, your game's a service. So a lot of, you know, here, for instance, is a shop. It shows you, oh, this just arrived. This is this week's special. And that means ongoing stuff has to be pumped into the economy to make it keep working. And then you get into all the issues of rare items and seasonal items and all of that. And it's a different breed than, a different kind of experience than a packaged good, than a packaged game. Game mechanics, such as the ones I talked about today, plus others, give you the goals and rewards. They're the next piece of the puzzle to making all this work together. They provide the goals and rewards that keep you playing. But they need careful balancing to work properly. And that's a whole talk in and of itself. But this is just an example. Many games now give you a bonus for logging in each day. You get some sort of login bonus that'll be, again, variable. The smart ones do a variable bonus. It's that variable reinforcement schedule I showed you earlier in the talk again. However, that's pumping money into the economy. So you're going to need to have a sink somewhere else to pull it out. And it's non-trivial to build that. But what we're finding in social games is that, you know, this is a lot of what keeps people coming back, and it's a lot of what sort of the next frontier of gaming is starting to look like. So thank you for your attention and all your great questions and feedback and comments. It made it really fun for me. Here's my contact information. If you want to get in touch, feel free. And I hope this was useful.